It seems these days, everywhere you turn, it feels a little bit apocalyptic. We have had a rash of toxic spills here. Kissimmee yesterday had a big fire that they were trying to get under control as toxic fumes went all over the place. And then a train derailment, obviously, earlier this week in Ohio, Palestine, where you've just got fish dying miles away. And I was thrilled when I heard that Erin Brockovich was coming on with us because she's famed now as a consumer activist, and she's out here doing important work in order to bring attention to corporate greed. So thank you for being on with us. A lot of people obviously may know the name from Julia Roberts and you being in the movie, but the backstory was you were a law clerk and you started fighting about this kind of stuff a long time ago when everyday citizens were being affected by a toxic spill in their area. And you realized, I don't know if it was for the first time, but you realized how corporate greed 30 years ago had already run amok in a way that was poisoning the environment. Thank you for joining us, Erin.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, it was 30. Oh, let's see. I began my work out in that famous little desert town in 1991. So about 30 years plus ago. And then the film came out 20 plus years ago. And, I came in, I was young. I'm 62 now, and I was just turning 31. And I came out, and it was kind of my first blush of what was corporate greed. And I was born and raised in Kansas, and just standing out there, instinctually, everything felt so wrong and everything looked so wrong. I felt like I'd been dropped into the land of Oz. The frogs had two heads, the water was green, people were complaining of all these symptoms. And see, I believed them. And I didn't think they were making this up. And that's one step we miss in so many of these stories is we just don't want to listen to the people of what's happening to them. And we don't want to believe what we're hearing or they're experiencing. And so I learned very early on my connection to the people and being and supporting and believing and understanding what they're going through, and then learning about a corporation and how frantically they want to try to suppress that voice and cover up that information, because at the end of the day, for them, somebody's going to legally chisel into those profits of theirs in a big old lawsuit, and they'll go to a lot of deaths to keep that quiet.
What do you think right now is happening in Ohio where 38 cars derail, vinyl chloride ends up burning, and things are dying 7.5 miles away?
Okay, on a common sense scale, something's wrong. I can't even almost sometimes not have a conversation when it's like what you just said. There was a train derailment. They were carrying hazardous chemicals. There was set, or they thought, to be an explosion. So they do some controlled burn. People are evacuated. They're sick. Reports of, projectile vomiting in children who can't breathe. Their lips are turning blue. Their throats feeling tingly. All of these issues.
That's a fine.
And ant chickens dying. Their foxes dying. Their cats are dying. The deer are dying. I mean, come on. We can say whatever we want, but something's wrong out there. And I have just been flooded with emails from the community. They're scared. They're confused. They don't know where to go. And the message is, I've never seen such a conflicting message so blatantly in everyone's face than I have this situation. So we have a train derailment on February 3rd, whether it's on fire, it's getting ready to catch fire, it's getting ready to blow up. They do a controlled burn. They put everybody into immediate evacuations, shelter in place. This is dangerous. Days go by. Then they say, oh, we've tested everything. Just poof, magically, it's safe. Come back home. They come back home. Then a few days later, oh, second thought, don't drink the water. Okay, well, that's a big alert. And then the next day, it's like, okay, drink the water. They are, the town hall meeting that happened there last night, these people are rightfully frustrated. They are fearful for their safety, for their animals, for their water. And it's like they are stuck up in some political corporate bullshit at their expense. And I can't imagine what they're feeling because I'm frustrated enough. And so, just in the short conversation that we've had, something's not right. Something doesn't make sense. They instinctually know this. And yes, one of the chemicals was vinyl chloride. And when it's under heat, when it's set on fire, it can turn into other gases. That may explain why the animals just suddenly died. But one chemical they're not talking about that they have confirmed was in some of those rail cars is the butyl acrylate. And what people might not know about that is if you read the MSDS sheet, that chemical has an additive. That additive is benzene. As of yesterday, they had detected this outside of the containment zone. But you're not looking for benzene. So is there some chemical here, something that's being slid under the rug that might even explain why these people are having blue lips, respiratory problems, and some of the health issues they are? I don't know. But in the absence of a whole lot of data that I haven't seen, I don't think anybody's being transparent about, here's the test results, take a look at them, here's the lab results, here's the detection limits, this is what we found, this isn't what we found. For anyone to deem this safe without knowing, seeing, or verifying that information is concerning. I could go on a rant. I think I'm already on a rant. I'm so worked up about this.
Well, you soften the ending when you just say concerning, because I don't know how bad this is going to get. I don't know how to get politics out of the conversation involving our impending environmental apocalypse here. I am at a bit of a loss for what to do and who to trust.
You trust? Yeah, and that is exactly how these people feel, and that we are trying to start sorting that out, talking with the law, looking at what the laws are, what is really going on out there, how could we test, how could we do a urine test, how could we find something that's missing, and waiting. And these situations can get covered up. You know, when I stumbled on my work out in Hinckley, California, that had been in place for years and covered up. As a matter of fact, every single environmental situation I work on throughout the country, including forever chemicals, has been covered up. And it can take a beat to begin to research it, gather information. I'm finally starting to hear from whistleblowers, railroad workers, as to what has really happened. Because you can count on the fact that Norfolk and some of our leaders aren't real good at coming forward and being transparent about what they've done.
The people you're hearing from, what are they saying, and who do you trust? Is there anyone outside of them that you trust?
Well, it's certainly not Norfolk. You'd like to believe in your leaders, but the messaging is so inconsistent that makes me skeptical. I'm supporting and I believe these people. Because oftentimes people don't want to believe these people. Oh, it's just a cough. You're making this up. The chickens didn't die. And that's the last thing that these communities do. So we could learn a lot from them, but we don't want to see or hear from them because we're probably going to find out what happened once people start testing. I encourage them, when in an administration's leaders, agencies, whatever you want to call them, that we've often, and we were brought up to believe, had our backs and our safety first and foremost, actually aren't going to do that. That they need to become their own citizens of science. They need to protect themselves, be vigilant, band together as a community, journal what's happening to you, document what's going on. We have this great little gadget called the phone. And this is where we're getting images of, the fish dying. But they will have to become their own protector and gather their own information to, at the end of the day, prove that this did happen to us, which I think is the biggest tragedy of all. You know, during COVID, I wrote my book, Superman's Not Coming, Our National Water Crisis, but what we the people can do about it. And that's the truth. Nobody is coming to stop these situations. They've been going on for 30 plus years. People aren't changing their mindset about how they're going to deal with them. We have failing infrastructures. It does feel apocalyptic. But once you recognize no one's coming to save you, by gosh, we can rise up. We'll ask the questions. We'll protect ourselves. We'll join our community. We'll get the answers. And that's what you're going to have to do. If you feel unsafe in that area, leave. If you feel unsafe and you don't want to come back, don't. But you have got to rely. They are the ones on the ground, drinking this, breathing it, living it, experiencing it. You have got to be your own best person and take care of yourself and make decisions on the ground of what it is you think is best. Be vigilant. Test your water. If the water smells, if the water's a different color, don't drink it. If you're getting another smell in the air, lock up the windows, maybe leave, but you have to rely on those, on what it is you're going to do in that situation to best protect yourself, your family, and your health, because nobody else, frankly, is going to do it for them or for me or for any of us.
Is there a way for you to be able to accurately project, just based on your experiences? I don't know if this is even fair to ask you. Just how bad the next coming months can be in that area if the worst of everything is true?
Well, if the worst of everything is true, it could have a very long lasting impact. And it would be speculation until we thoroughly know, and this is what's frustrating, what the actual chemicals are. Right now, we only know what Norfolk is choosing to tell us. What I have learned is over time, generally somebody from within gets some morals. They don't like what's going on, and somebody might send me an email. But these chemicals don't just go away overnight. So there could be a long-term impact, as we've learned with these forever chemicals that don't break down well in the environment, that don't break down well in the water. And we could be looking at a long-term environmental problem. So again, we're missing so much information, and that's what's so frustrating for this community. You've had a major train derailment, and you've got a state EPA. I guess the US EPA is going to be there now. You've got their governor and layers of administration that can't seem to get any answers either. Just goes really to how unprepared we are for these types of situations that are becoming way too common. So the impacts can be long lasting. And this is why I'm pushing hard at my back end here to try to ascertain and decipher what kind of chemical are we actually dealing with, and what kind of chemical is out there that they're not looking for, or they don't want to tell us that they've found. Once you know that kind of information, you can get a better trajectory of long-term. In Hinckley, California, the hexavalent chromium, and I started that in the 90s, that chemical hit the groundwater aquifer in the late 50s at astronomical levels of about 58 parts per million. And by the way, we just have a guideline for this chemical at 50 parts per billion. So if that gives you an idea how large the magnitude of this chemical was, they were under an estimated cleanup then of 150 plus years. 150 plus years. And so there's immediate effects, and there's this long-term situation of our water. I can't think of anything or a greater commodity that this country has than our land and water. And when we're now encroaching with so much pollution in our water, and cleanups are 150 plus years. It's daunting.
Erin, I don't know that I can actually pivot to anything more depressing than what we're already talking about. If I go,
I just felt the same way.
if I go to National Water Crisis with you and your book Superman's Not Coming, I'm going to ask you about it. But let me just stay with a couple of more questions here. What do you make of David Sirota of The Lever reporting that Norfolk Southern, the company that that owns the train the train that derailed and that Erin has been talking about, that they lobbied to kill federal safety checks?
Of course they did. You know, I again, in Superman's Not Coming, I talk a great deal about antiquated and failing infrastructure. And, you know, they don't want to have to deal with the added cost on the upfront of maintenance or infrastructure, because that doesn't get them to their bottom line of a good profit. So I definitely think, you know, these big companies have lobbying groups that can go in and make a lot of, you know, magical things happen in politics on what they can be exempt from or what they don't have to do.
You've seen it so many different places. I'm curious, the most appalling of the corporate greed that you have seen when you see these kinds of things covered up unethically.
Well, I think one of the worst pollutions is the forever chemicals known as perfluorooctanoic acid. Most people would know it as Teflon. They would know it as the plastic coatings on our coffee cups. They would know it as fire retardants. They would know it as Scotch Guard. I mean, that's in every single product that 3M and DuPont manufactured decades ago. Actually let the EPA know that this might be a chemical that could be hard to remove from the environment, yet it's allowed to get into the environment for decades. And now we've learned that it's destroyed a huge swath of farming land and aquifers and water supplies across the country. I'm working on this chemical in every single state in America, and specifically the past 2 years been in Maine. We all know the state of Maine, beautiful, pristine, organic farming. Well, this chemical got into their aquifers, and they've now had to kill the cattle because it got in the milk. You can't eat the eggs. You can't drink the water. You can't eat the fish. You can't hunt the deer. You can't eat the deer meat. So we've now taken a chemical and spread it on the land and destroyed farming, organic farming, and the water, and it's gotten into the food chain. I think this is will be the biggest environmental issue of our time, because I don't know what we're possibly thinking when we allow chemicals into the stream of commerce and it ends up contaminating the land, the water, and the food chain.
Erin, I don't know how, given that you've dedicated your life to this activism. You can get the Brockovich report. It's a free newsletter, because she has dedicated herself to fighting this thing, and it must feel hopeless, even as you tell us in your book what we can do about the water crisis, to see us this hell-bent on destroying the earth.
It's been really hard. I'm so glad you brought that up, because oftentimes, you know, I'll do shows and I leave thinking, well, they're never going to have me back again, because it's so daunting. It's so depressing. It's so overwhelming. Where would the hope be? But I have to tell you, 30 years on the ground, and as daunting as it's been, there is hope. I think we are in one of the better moments in my 30-year career of waking up and realizing, whether we were comfortable or complacent or we just bought the BS, that we're going to have to speak up. And in these communities, historically and even currently, I'll tell you, there's the biggest hope for me is the moms. Oh, see, now they're getting fed up. and they're going to make it their job because they're protecting their babies. I'm going to find out what's going on, and I'm going to do something about it. So the hope still resides with us, the very people throughout this entire country that can make the change. And they're willing to do it. And I'm going to stand right there and be willing to support them and help them in any way that I can. So I think there's a great awakening happening. I that sounds silly, but it is. And I don't know if after COVID and everything shut down, can you think about that? We shut the world down, that we had a moment to go, what the hell is happening? And in an even longer moment to kind of pop our heads up and around and start asking questions and looking around and going, what actually is going on? But I think if that we can continue to have these conversations, we continue to see, for so long, all of us in these communities and every community I've dealt with, it's always been, though, you're not a politician, you're not a scientist, you're not a doctor, you're not this, you're not that. What would you know? That has moved us away from these actual common sense set of skills and instincts that we have to go, well, I don't think I have to be any of that to be smart enough to tell you the two-headed frog and the green water and the train derailment that you've burning off, and I've got massive black plumes flying over me, that something isn't right. And that we can now get connected to that and stay with that, because that is what will be life-saving for all of us, is our action and our responses. And once again, believing in what it is we know we're living in, drinking, how we're responding to it, and nobody else knows that better than you, and rising up. And I'm just seeing it now. It's just playing itself out across the entire country.
It must be so frustrating to you, though, to be shouting at everybody, writing books. Hey, our national water crisis. Water's pretty important. I'd prefer in my lifetime not to be fighting over it because we have ruined our water.
You know, when you say shouting, I hope I'm not shouting at you, because I find myself doing that all the time. Even my kids are like, Mom, why are you shouting at me? I'm not shouting at you. I'm so passionate and compassionate about this. It's been tough. Again, like I just said, I think there's a wake-up moment where maybe we're all starting to see it. And here's the thing. All of us are better than this. And I'm perplexed as to why we continue to kick the can down the line for the sake of profits when we're going to lose so much, if not everything, if we don't change a corporate mentality or a political ideology and recognize that our land and water and air and the health of our citizens is in fact our greatest commodity and the best thing that we have, and we can do business a better way. We have the means, we have the technology, we have the funding to upgrade our infrastructures, to implement ways to remove chemicals. We have a voice, we can be transparent and step out here and say, this was wrong, this is bad, I'm not sure how we can clean it up, but we're going to find a solution to it. We have the means. And I really think that we are in a moment where there is nowhere else to kick the can down the line. And it's time for us to implement those technologies. It is time to change antiquated policies, antiquated infrastructures, antiquated laws, and get us on the right track. We're at a fork in the road. I hope we don't continue to follow our old historic, certainly in our environmental issues, ideas that have gotten us nowhere, and take a future path that we have the means and the ability to clean up our mess and move forward in a better way.
I'll let you go on this note. Again, she's the author of Superman's Not Coming, Our National Water Crisis, and What We, the People, Can Do About It. She's been a crusader against corporate greed for a long time, an environmental activist, an advocate, a pioneer, an icon, really, in the work that she's doing. What is, as briefly as you can say it, our national water crisis in the ways that we have not covered, and what can the people do about it who are interested or moved by you telling them that they need to be interested and moved?
Well, I think that we're all learning that the difference can be is you believing that you can. I've seen this for a long time. And the idea that we take on, like I said earlier, if we're not this or that, you know what? You don't have to be any of that to be human and to be strong and to believe, yes, you can. I can step up to the plate. I can have this conversation. I can be a part of that change. That is the first step for all of us to take. I got this. I too can do this, and I will rise up and be a part of that change. Believe in you.
That's very self-helpy, but that doesn't tell me how I stop the national water crisis.
Well, that's in part how you stop the national water crisis. When you step up and step out, we can begin to see where all these national water crises are. And if every person in that community would join a force across this country, we could start, at a ground level locally, getting involved with your local city council, getting your community involved, and just cleaning up the situation that's happening in your own backyard. And if every community and every city council did that across this country, we'd actually affect some change. So one thing people can do, show up, ask questions, show up to a city council meeting, take the time to understand your water quality report. If you're seeing something and while you're out on a hike and a bunch of dead animals and the water's running purple, make that phone call, make that report. If every one of us just took that action in our own backyard across the country, again, we could help reduce our water problems. And a lot of times people don't realize that. They think this comes from federal or from state, when many regulations and many policies and many changes begin in your own backyard at your very own city council. And take the time to show up, take the time to go to a meeting. You might be shocked at what you can find and shocked at what you can do.
Erin, thank you for your time and for your work. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Well, thank you. It was nice talking to you again. I hope I wasn't shouting. It's definitely my passion
I was not
and frustration.
I was not accusing you of shouting. I don't know how you're not shouting more. You must be very frustrated. Thank you for being on with us.
Thanks. It's nice to talk to you.